So, Doug, you're Chief Executive Officer of a major energy corporation with operations both here in Canada and in the United States. Some really exciting new plays developing in the northeastern part of British Columbia. But you get an opportunity to see public confidence and project decision making and energy systems in two very different jurisdictions. What's your perspective on how the country's doing here in Canada? What remains to be done?
Well, I think what's been fascinating that's happened with energy over the last 10 or 15 years is how it's moved from the shadows to the forefront. And throughout my career, I've had a chance to work all over the world and be in not only developed nations, but developing nations. And the difficult part of this conversation is it's very different in developed countries than developing countries. Demand for energy is growing as fast as it's ever grown at any time in history. Demand for oil and gas is at the highest levels of all time and still growing quite rapidly. Yet if you sit in Canada or the United States or Europe, you actually find those same trends are not happening here. Demand for energy is relatively flat. The demand for oil and natural gas is flat or dropping. So where is this demand coming from? And it's actually coming from about the 2.5 billion people around the world who are trying to move out of poverty. They're trying to move into middle class. And this is a very different issue for them than it is here. And I think this is one of the things that's challenging about it. Particularly in Canada, we're an exporting nation. We're a supplier of energy to others today. But what we find is, and it comes down to some of the comments earlier, is it is very local. So if you're in a place where people don't have electricity to power a light bulb or to refrigerate food or to cook their dinner in the evening, what they're expecting and the issues that are most important to them are very different than you live in a modern society with the comforts we all enjoy here. So I think when we find in our business, both in Canada and the United States, we're actually in an age of abundance of energy today. We're seeing that. There's a famous geologist in the industry, goes back to the 30s, named Wallace Pratt, who had a great saying. He said, oil and gas isn't found in the ground, it's found in the minds of men and women. I think he said men at the time, but we'll modernize the statement a little bit. And it's absolutely true. As the demand grows, the industry tries to find it. But what's happened is, and we've seen it happen before, is the public's expectations move and change. If you look at modern cities today, when they transitioned off of coal to other forms of fuel, it was actually social needs that drove that. It was actually smog and pollution which drove those issues. And I think one of the things we've learned as an industry and we found very uncomfortable is we need to do more engagement. We need to do more information sharing. We actually preferred it when we could operate in the background and just make sure your lights came on, and if you went to the filling station, gasoline came out of the pump. But expectations are higher now than they ever have been. I think what's most challenging for our business, though, I think we know how to engage and communicate locally around the people who are directly impacted by our operations. We've got a long history of that. But now we find people thousands of miles away who want to be involved in those same discussions. And similar to the other panelists, we're finding it difficult. What's the best way to engage with those people? Because we don't interact with them every day like we do with the people who live right down the road from our operations.